He spent 151 days circumnavigating the world alone, and in 2012 and 2013, when he completed this accomplishment, he was received by the President of India to celebrate this incredible work that he had done. Without really resting on his laurels, in 2018, he attempted to circumnavigate the world all over again, this time injured himself so badly that they had to put titanium implants in his spine, which earned him the nickname Titanium Tomy. In 2022, with those titanium implants in his spine, Abhilash Tomy attempted once again and this time finished second as he circumnavigated the world, this time spending 236 days alone in the sea, battling these high storms, which are impossible to imagine. You just have to see those videos to imagine how crazy it can be to do this by yourself in a tiny boat. But let's hear it from Commander Abhilash Tomy. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. I want to ask you a question right at the offset. How much time have you spent just by yourself? And by that, I mean by yourself with no other human being alone. 1 day, 2 days, 15 days, 2 months, 3 months. How about a year? Well, if you haven't, then here is something that I'm going to introduce you to. I actually met Abhilash Tomy a couple of years back at a conference where both of us were speaking, and this was in NIPM Kerala. When I first heard his story, I was completely blown away. And the reason why I was blown away was just the sheer courage of somebody who can land up spending 151 days circumnavigating the world in a small yacht which has batteries enough to be able to, for electricity, and that's pretty much it. How do you even think of doing something like that? And not just once. After that, he's done it again, and he spent almost 500 days. And I just had to bring you the story of Abhilash Tomy because it is so inspiring. With that said, Abhilash, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Abhijit. It's a pleasure to be here.
I want to go back to the day where you were in the Navy and you thought about circumnavigating the Earth. What was that thought process like? What made you want to do that?
Well, this thought process happened much before I joined the Navy. It happened maybe when I was 6 or 7 years old. I was introduced to boats and to planes because of an accident. And I decided that the only thing I wanted to do with my life was to fly planes and sail boats. And that's why I joined the Navy. I joined the Navy and then take up sailing as a sport. And then somebody gives me a magazine where it talks about around the world single-handed race. And when I'm 17 or 18, I see this magazine, this desire arises that I need to circumnavigate the earth alone someday. Next step, I get a commission, become a pilot, keep my focus on sailing at the same time. One thing leads to another. And I end up doing my first circumnavigation in 2012-13. 5 months at sea, all alone, no stops, no humans around.
Wow. And when you think of doing something like that, are there moments when you kind of regret that you've taken this up, or did you never ever have that self-doubt?
Absolutely not. So when I started my first circumnavigation, I had three criteria for success. One, the boat had to come back in as good a shape as it was when it left. The second, I should not get bored. And the third, at no point in time during the voyage should I ask myself, why are you doing this? Because the moment that question why arises, the voyage is a failure for me.
So how do you keep that motivation going? What is the method? Because, I am just thinking of a scenario where so many of us, we have some kind of a dream, some kind of an ambition. And when you get down to actually pursuing it, you realize that, my God, it's much harder than I thought. And there are so many times when you feel that you should give up. Why, why did you never feel that way? What was driving you?
So it's always easy to give up. The journeys that we embark upon is always quite difficult. But I need to give you this example of how I sailed with another gentleman called Captain Donde from Goa to Mauritius. This is one of the first offshore sailing I was doing. Uh, Standing on land, this entire business of going in a sailboat looks very romantic. But when
Mm.
you're inside the boat, that's when you realize that the world is a mess. Your bunk is wet. You got water dripping into your eyes when you try to sleep. You're constipated. You're nauseous. You can't eat normal food. There is salt everywhere. It's so hot that you're sweating and sweating and sweating and you're dehydrated. And this is a very uncomfortable feeling. And on top of that, you got the storms or the lulls and whatever that happens. Now I realized that I was always focusing at the destination. If the boat's speed went up by zero point 0.5, zero point 0.05 knots, I quickly calculate and I realize that I'm reaching, let's say, 2 days in advance. And I'm happy because in X number of days, I get a nice hotel room, nice bed, nice shower or whatever, air conditioned room, nice food and all that. And if the boat speed dropped, it became a very miserable experience for me because that hotel room is now so many days further into the future. And that I realized that that was the source of my misery. The fact that I was constantly looking at the end goal, the destination. And one day I decided to stop thinking about the destination and to accept whatever the surroundings were throwing me at that given point in time. If it was wet, I decided to accept the wetness. If it was hot, I decided to accept the heat. And like that, when I became comfortable in that moment, all I had to do was remain in that moment till I reached the destination. And now it doesn't matter when you reach your destination.
Do you ever feel very lonely and bored? What are some of those moments of isolation like?
I never feel lonely and I never feel bored. One of the reasons is because of the fact that I constantly meditate when I'm at sea. I focus on my breath, and that keeps it. It brings me back to the present moment. Whenever my mind tries to wander or whatever, it it always gets me back to the present moment. Uh, I don't feel lonely because I don't know. I can't explain why, but yeah, that's how it is. For me, the fact that you're alone at sea
Hmm.
gives me a sense of freedom that cannot be experienced on land. And this freedom comes from the fact that you don't need to, let's say, for example, you don't need to have an opinion on somebody else. You don't need to wonder what somebody else is thinking about you. You're free to decide what you want to do. You're free to decide what to wear. You're free to have uh, you're free to believe in something. You're free to change your belief without wondering what somebody else is going to think about it. You're free of sin. You're free of morality that society imposes on you. You're free of guilt. And by staying away from the world, I can kind of understand how the world functions. And this is what gives me the freedom. I fall in love with the freedom, and then I'm just happy being there. My problem is coming back to people after being alone for so long.
What is that transition like? What is the most difficult part about coming back and living with, let's say, the family or your friends again, when you've been so used to just being by yourself?
But there's a physical transition that happens where you need to adjust to the same sleep wakefulness cycle of other people. At sea, you follow polyphasic sleep pattern. You sleep for 15, 20 minutes, you get up, do something, and you repeat that. On land, you need to sleep at night and you need to stay awake during daytime. You need to follow the same pattern of eating, the same pattern of wearing clothes that others impose on you. That's a physical aspect of coming back. But there's another mental aspect where, immediately after you come back, you feel that the world is a screen. There are other characters in it. They are, fighting with each other, joking with each other. All these things happen on the screen. You watch it, you enjoy it, but you are not involved with it. And from that state, you need to get to a level where you are now involved with the world. And that takes a bit of a toll. It's a bit of a transition, but you have to undergo that.
You came back, after spending 151 days circumnavigating the world in a sailing yacht, which is wind driven. You didn't have anything beyond, a regular a battery that to generate electricity. Um, what happens when you're in the middle of the sea and you face severe storms? I've seen those kind of storms in movies, and it's absolutely frightening when you see those sky high waves come up, and you feel so tiny and small and insignificant. How did you even deal with that?
The first storm is always tough because it's your first experience. You don't have any reference, and it kind of teaches you how your mind is, how your mind functions. So what I believe is that your mind is something that takes input from the present, okay, through your senses, compares with an event of the past, projects you into a future, and depending on whether the future is beautiful or terrible, it will create an emotion in you. So if it's a storm, my past experience of a storm was bad. I broke my spine. The mind will project me into a future where everything is going to be bad. It will create anxiety, stress, and all these things to protect me right now, right? Now, when the first storm hits you, you don't have a reference. You quite enjoy it. That's what happens. When the second storm hits you, now you have a reference and now you're a bit scared. But trust me, by the time the fourth or the fifth storm hits, it's like, there's another storm. Even this will pass.
When you were facing it, describe to me that moment where you were, experiencing that first massive storm. What were the waves like? And paint that picture for me about what was happening with you as you were experiencing that.
I still remember it was nearly a month into my first voyage in 2012. It was November or early December. We were rounding Cape Leuven, and that's when we had this 50 knot storm hit. And I saw those waves, and the waves were so tall that you could see sunlight filter through the top layers, and you could see the gradient of the water from dark blue to a turquoise right at the top and frothing there. I was literally dancing on the deck because, for me, this is what I spent my money and time to come and see. That's what the feeling I had. So it was a very joyous occasion, of course, and I did not realize what the storm could do to me. My boat was not bigger than a matchbox, and I was as weak as a matchstick. But it was an incredible moment. It was something that I will never forget.
And when you, was it the same place where you got hurt and you broke your spine? And I've read that you are now described as titanium Tommy because of all the implants in your spine and all of that. And when did that happen?
So this was in 2018. After I finished my first circumnavigation, there was a presidential reception. All those things happened, and that's when I decided to, raise the bar, do something bigger. And I decided to take part in a very crazy race called the Golden Globe Race. And the Golden Globe Race stipulates that you have to sail as if it's 1968. So the tech has to be 1968. The boats have to be really small, long keel, with all ancient materials in it, no high-tech fiber or communication system, nothing. So I built a boat in India, took part in the race, and by the 82nd day, I was running in third position, just 100 miles behind number two. Now, this is the setting. Geographically, you're exactly between Australia and South Africa. You're dead south of India, right? So this is the farthest from any continent other than the Antarctic, if you ask me, in the Indian Ocean. And that's where this happened. We were hit by a massive storm. I fell about, I think, 5, 6 meters, landed with my back on the boom, and had multiple fractures in my spine. I was disabled for nearly 3 or 4 days. Couldn't get up, couldn't cook, couldn't eat, couldn't drink water, and yeah, that's a huge story. That happened in 2018, 21st of September, and I was rescued tomorrow. That is 24th of September.
Wow, we are recording this on 23rd of September 2025. So this is pretty much the time when it happened. Uh,
Yes,
Describe to me those
yes.
3 days when you were there hurt alone, and what were you doing to get help and get out of that situation? What was going through your mind at that time?
So I sent a text message on the satellite device to the race director saying, "Rolled, dismasted, severe back injury, cannot get up." And after I sent that message, I knew that rescue is going to come, but I did not know when. It could be 2 days, 5 days, 10 days. I did not know how many days. And all I had to do was survive till then. Now, this is, let's say, akin to putting somebody inside a coffin and shutting the lid, right? The man there can survive as long as he doesn't panic. And that was my state. I was inside a boat, very tiny boat with no agency, absolutely no agency. I can't stand, cook, can't do anything, can't repair, the dismasted mast. So I couldn't do anything. Instead, I decided to turn my focus inward, which was resorted to a lot of focused breathing so that I don't panic. And the next thing that I did is I started planning for the future. And in those 3 days, when there was no stress of racing, I was like, how do I get back into the race in 2022? Which boat am I going to buy? Who's going to be my technical manager? Who's going to be my team manager? And how do I approach a sponsor? These were the questions that I was trying to solve lying in the boat. Of course, there were other mundane things like making a briefing for the doctor whom I would eventually meet, making a briefing for the rescuers, etc., etc. But my primary concern was to maintain my mental health, not to panic, survive, stay alive, and prepare for that future, which I was already inventing, uh, lying in the boat.
So one of the things that, if I were to translate this, to my own life and sort of say that, what can I learn from Abhilash? And the answer would be pretty straightforward that, when you will, all of us face setbacks and, things don't go according to plan. Potentially, very few of us experience the extreme, pain and discomfort that you went through. So the real thing that I learned from this is that, to stay calm is actually the first thing, that not to, when a disaster hits you, the first thing is to stay calm. Is that the right way to start thinking about it? Or if I were to draw some lessons from what I can do, what would that be?
Absolutely. So when I was talking about the nature of the mind, in the previous question that you asked, I spoke how the mind functions. Now, if you have too much of fear, you get paralyzed. You cannot act. If you have too little fear, you do something so stupid that you'll kill yourself. Too much optimism, you fail to plan for the future. Too little optimism, you're so pessimistic that you don't want to do anything, right? So these extremes of emotions are not good. The idea is that you bring your mind to that neutral point where you have fear, but not too much of it. You have, optimism, but not too much of it. You have pessimism, but not too much of it, etc., etc. You bring your mind to that neutral point, and it is from that neutral point that you need to act.
How do you
That has been my biggest learning.
how do you I'm just intrigued, how do you change the level of optimism and pessimism, that too much of it is, and I can completely relate to that, that if you're just feeling overconfident, you'll end up doing something silly. If you are underconfident, you will be so depressed that you will not be able to pull yourself out. How do you regulate that? What is that process like?
You're absolutely right. And before I answer that, let me tell you, high levels of optimism is inversely proportional to the resilience of a person, right? So extremely optimistic people score poorly on resilience because they think everything's going to be all right and they don't do anything for that future.
Wow, that's so
Yeah, so there are
fascinating.
it is quite an interesting observation. So there are techniques that I use, one of which is meditation. Uh, it involves breathing and chanting meaningless sounds. That's one way of doing it. There are philosophies that help you deal with it. For example, you mentioned a term setback,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I agree, it was a setback, but it is you who gives meaning to that setback. It is you who decides whether it's a negative thing or a positive thing, or if it is one of the things that happen to you in your life. And if you see it as one of the things that happen to you in your life, you'll not really be bothered by the so-called failure. In fact, that's what happened. I come back to India.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a huge loss because I lost my yacht. My wife is pregnant. I come home in a wheelchair. Nearly four nations were looking for me. What do you call such a person? Conventionally, you call him a failure, right? But that's not how the society treated me. Nobody called me a failure. In fact, I also refused to believe I was a failure. Agreed, I tried something huge. agreed it did not work out the way it should have or I had anticipated, but I refused to call it or define it by this term called failure. It is one of the things that happened to me in my life.
So you kind of reframe this particular incident in the context of your entire life and say that this is one
All,
incident.
all, all incidents, all incidents. I
Mm.
mean, it's wrong to cherry pick and say failure is not failure, but success is success.
Mm. Because we do that with success and failure in equal measure. We kind of say that, okay, I'm like super successful because this is one thing that has worked out. If you look at it in the context of your
Yes,
life, it's just one
yes,
small moment. It's a little blip, and And what I learned from this is the way that you reframe it in your head is actually the starting point of what you feel and how you respond to it. Because if you don't reframe it with the correct calibration, that's when it either becomes so demoralizing that you can't get out of it, or it becomes so trivial that you'll end up doing something silly all over again. So it's
absolutely, absolutely. There is no learning if you think it was too trivial. And if you're too demoralized, there is no next step.
wow. This is like something truly unique. I've never heard this in any conversation with anyone. That how do you reframe this entire thing? So you come back in a wheelchair with the broken spine and multiple fractures and all of that. Which year was that, and what did you do after that?
This is 2018. So 24th of September, I'm rescued, taken to a remote island. 6 days after the accident, I'm picked up from there and I'm brought to India. I reach a hospital after 16 days. 17th day, I'm put in a special plane and taken to Delhi for surgery. 18th day, I come out of surgery with two titanium rods, five vertebrae fused into a single piece. Uh, a week or two later, I'm discharged. I'm told go home and recuperate. I'm given 2 months off. Now, when I come home, I'm in a wheelchair. Wife is pregnant. Finances, like I said, I was very wealthy in the negative sense, and I was so weak that I could not climb a 4-inch step. I was so weak that when I tried to drive a car, I did not have the strength to pick up my leg and put it on the accelerator. Forget pressing the accelerator, I could not even keep it on the accelerator. And from that point in my life, I got into therapy. And 2 months later, I was able to go to Delhi on my own. In 6 months, I did Pilates, kickboxing, uh, running in a swimming pool to get my coordination back, a lot of gym exercises, just because I had this aim that in 2024, I wanted to get back into the race. So in 6 months, from the time I report on duty, I get into aircraft, I start flying planes, do my basic, the main job of being a pilot in the Navy. I get into a boat and start sailing. This was a long journey, but I had a lot of help from my family. In between, I was blessed with a baby boy as well. So, yeah, a lot of good news there.
If your kid decides to do exactly what you did, how would you describe that?
He will have my 100% support because I believe this is life trying to discover itself.
How do you stay positive like this? I'm just so impressed with just I'm putting myself in that situation, and I kind of think that it must have been really hard when you're lying there with a broken spine with no hope of when somebody will find you, and to actually stay sane through that moment. And I like the way you described it. It's like you're in a coffin with the lid shut. As long as you don't panic, you stay alive. So
Yes, yes. So that was a trick. And, like the first example I gave of sailing to Mauritius, all I had to do inside the boat with a broken spine was to accept that moment, be happy in that moment, and I just had to remain in that moment till rescue came.
it's
I
just
hope you're getting my point. I just had to remain in that moment, and then I could be in that moment for another 3 days, 4 days, or 10 days. But I was okay. I was happy. I had accepted it. Physically, yes, there was a lot of discomfort. There was pain in the back. There was a lot of acidity, which was, causing a lot of chest burn. I could not sleep because the nerve to my diaphragm got irritated and there was constant hiccups. And then I noticed a correlation. If I vomited, the hiccups stopped for 30 minutes and I could sleep. So I was inducing vomit to sleep for 30 minutes. And the thing is, if you lie down flat and vomit, there's a good chance that you will choke on your own vomit. So I had to, put my head in one direction, put my hand under it, and then vomit to the side. I had to do all these things, but I was okay. I was not panicking. I was not desperate. I was not anxious because I had accepted everything that was happening to me at that moment, and I did not want to change anything.
Abhilash, I can only say that, people like you are so rare and so inspirational. And it's such a privilege to be able to talk to you and learn from just the way you think and the way you've operated. It's just so incredible. It's a lesson I am not going to forget in a hurry. And thank you so much for your time and doing this. I appreciate your energy and your vision and your dream. And all I can say is don't ever give up.
Thank you. Thank you. It was wonderful talking to you, Abhijit.